Peachester used to be a very productive area.
Hey.
Today there's still some productive industries in the area. Macadamia nuts, dairying, timber. But in the main, it's residential area now, lifestyle blocks. People got a few cows and horses. So it has changed quite dramatically in more recent times to what it was originally. If you're going to have a community spirit, you've really got to have a meeting place for activities, and the hall fills that role and has really ever since it was, first built.
I think every town needs a hall. I think it just keeps towns together and keeps communities together.
It served the purpose of when it was the original hall was built here on this site. It served the purpose as the school and the church and the community meeting centre, and it's sort of fulfilled that role ever since that time.
Peachester is, for a small place, is very rich in history. People have been here for a very long time doing all sorts of amazing things.
Peachester's still got the remnants of that old pioneer spirit. Those early settlers here, they took up a petition, sent in a letter early in 1889 asking for a reserve for School of Arts.
To the Honourable the Minister for Lands, we pray that you will grant us an allotment in the township lately surveyed on the Peachtree Reserve for the erection of a School of Arts.
So then during that year all the documents went backwards and forwards.
The Secretary for Public Lands recommends that the lands as set forth in the accompanying description be set apart for School of Arts.
The Secretary for Public Lands recommends that the persons hereunder named as trustees be appointed to have the control and management of the reserve.
And then supposedly the story goes that, people donated material and volunteer labour, and it was a real community effort getting it up.
My grandfather was involved very, very heavily in it, as in the timber.
Peachester was quite a vibrant area before the other areas.
All the other halls in the district weren't really built until quite a lot later.
Because Peachester had timber and an abundance of it, it was an area where things were happening. My great-grandfather was a bullocky and worked in the timber industry.
My grandfather, he was one of the people who started the Peachester sawmill that was originally down on the bank of the Stanley River before it was moved over to its present position. One of William Andrews' grandsons, Neville Grigger, still owns and manages the sawmill.
That is the old saw. It was in Grandad's mill. The reason it was built on the river was for the steam, the water for the steam engine.
Around the mill grew a settlement.
There was a big reserve for pasturage and water down on the river where the bullockies camped with their bullock teams.
Well, they used to bring the bullocks across the river below where the bridge is now, and they'd pull up there and they'd sit down and boil the billy.
And the legend is that they dropped peach stones there and peach trees grew up, and that's where the name Peach Trees came from. It was called Peachtree's Reserve.
Then an English school teacher come out, this is what I believe, and he said, how can you call it peach trees? You've got to have Chester on the end of it, because Manchester and all the Chesters in England.
The selections, first of all, in the 1880s were around the river, but within the loop of the river it was really still part of Durandur Station, which stretched right over to Woodford.
There was a big station, there had quite a large number of people working on it. My great-grandmother worked at Durandur Station when she met my great-grandfather.
This was all a Durandur Station, all Peachester was all Durandur Station.
And the government had a policy at the time of a lot of those big early runs were actually broken up later. And, we've got a map, an estate map, where it shows that the government has split it up and is putting it up for public auction, the blocks. They had quite a few requirements that they had to carry out. To clear a certain area, they had to build some kind of dwelling. I don't think it had to be very fancy.
My grandfather, Walter, won in a ballot a parcel of land over 300 acres here in Peachester back in 1907, became a dairy farm. Dairying back in those days would have been tough work. You didn't have electricity back then. It would have been all hand dairying.
Oh, extremely difficult. My dad never knew what a wage was. They had about 25 milking cows, you know.
There were enough families that they considered they, might be able to have enough students, so they sent in, the required paperwork with names of how many children might be interested in starting. In 1892, the provisional school started here in the hall, and Henry Hume was the first teacher, and his wife Ellen, she delivered a lot of people's babies. She rode around on horseback.
In World War I, a number of people went from the area.
William Henry Hampton Hume, whose parents were the teacher and the nurse Hume, he was actually killed at Gallipoli on the 10th of May 1915, and another young man from the district, William Miners, was killed on, I think, the 4th of May at Gallipoli. So we've got two who we think about a lot. One big change that happened during both wars was that while the men were away, the women had to take a more active role in farm life.
I think he might have gone broke. It was the last year of the First World War. I think they might have run out of money.
There was a lot of people employed in scrub falling. It was fairly hard work, fairly dangerous. You had to work hard, but it was good money. It was 30 bob an acre to clear it. Dad fell scrub, and he said if they were sitting up in the scrub waiting for it to get daylight enough to work, and they worked till dark, the two of them could brush and fall an acre in a day.
My dad was Bob Breton. He and his brother would go into the bush and cut timber as a source of income. There was a lot of standing scrub on the farm. Dad was 12 years of age.
The first wedding in the church was between Ellen Grigger and Walter Ferris.
Orange blossoms, Ferris Grigger. The Peachester Methodist Church was the scene of a pretty and interesting wedding on Wednesday, April the 6th.
It was a real event those days because you got described right down to the dresses they wore and who attended the weddings.
Then it said that they had their reception in the hall next door.
Back in those days when those sort of things happened, people really dressed up. Would have been a real affair in that day.
When I was a child, everybody knew about Inigo Jones. They named their property Cromhurst after an estate in England near where they lived. Inigo bought a set of instruments which he set up in the garden of their new home up there. And the big claim to fame of our district is that in 1893, while the big floods were on in Brisbane, Inigo actually measured the record rainfall for Australia of over a 24-hour period. He says he really took that as a natural salute to his interest in weather. It was like an omen that he needed to keep it up. He managed to get enough interest to get himself going and build the Cromhurst Observatory in 1935. I think it might have been a bit difficult to work for because one fellow that we had used to come and he worked for Inigo when he was a young man just measuring the rainfall and all that. And we said, oh, this is great, tell us all about it. And he said, I wasn't there for long. I broke a test tube.
His first woodshop was Mullaney, which he won, and then he rode his horse from here to Delaney's Creek, Woodford, Mount Me, where they had wood-shops.
So he realised that if you went to the local sports where there was a wood shop, prize money was £10. In those days it was a lot of money.
They just tie his axe to the saddle and get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ride, and then ride back. My mother met him at a wood shop, you know, and he was the young fellow around town. Every time he went away, he paid for his trip. He even paid for his honeymoon. He came home with more money than he went with. So that's what you do on your honeymoon, see? All his mates were joining up. My dad joined up with Nev Anning.
Well, they had been all good friends, and they'd been wood chopping and all sorts of things like that together, and they all used to play cricket.
Nev thought they were all going to go and help sort this out.
Basically, they were just very proud of their country, and off they went.
Dad had an old Whippet, you know, one of those early model cars, and they went down to Landsborough to join up, and my father was rejected because he had low blood pressure.
As the soldiers enlisted from here, they were all given a send-off.
A couple of months later, he went to Caboolture, and he told me, he said, I felt really guilty if I didn't go to war, see? Because all his mates were going, and he went to Caboolture and tried to sign up, and they said, what do you do? He said, I got a farm, and they said, go back and farm.
Everyone had to do everything they could to feed the troops, particularly once the Americans come into the war. During the Second World War, the officers worked out of here. It was a serious time. Everyone's main focus was on the war effort.
Dad became used to ride around and find out people's ages and how many were here and how many were there to evacuate.
We used to get a lot of information off the news.
That was one of my earliest memories, is having everybody shut up when the news was on. Remembering that they got a wireless, a big radio. It was 900 high. And it'd crackle and pop and static was on. It was shocking. And you could not even move your chair. Dad would be listening.
There were a big group of young men of this district who were in the 8th Division when Singapore fell, and they ended up as POWs of the Japanese. Nev and his brother and several other young local men were prisoners of war for 3.5 years.
He was in Changi jail along with many other Australians, and basically starving to death, being fed just rice. You know, mateship is what got everybody through, and Australians held strong. Dad was exempt for a little bit because he was working on the farm, and then he went down to join up, and that's when peace came.
I can remember the day World War II stopped. For some reason we had to go to Nambour. Everybody in Nambour was dragging tins around behind Ford Prefects. Little old cars. And Dad said, I bet the war's over. And he was right.
It was very, very lucky that the war ended when it did, because they had finished making the aerodrome, which is now still part of the Singapore airport. And they were then being tasked digging a humongous hole, and they all knew that that's what they were going to be put into.
After the war was over, everyone just really got on with their life. A lot of soldiers came back from the war, and they were setting up businesses, and it was a very busy time for the district.
My mother was in the CWA, and as all the other mothers were, all my friends that went to school with, all their mothers were in the CWA. It was just part of being in the district. If you're in the district, you're CWA.
Well, I came here in 1955, and Mum said, join CWA when you go there, and to have companionship with other women. No, there was no power here in the hall, so they used to have their meeting. They used to boil the copper to make a cup of tea. And it was mainly, they used to ride their horses if they could, or walk.
After the war, Nev Anning came back. He should have died. He had cholera and everything. He should have died, but he got through. He worked to redo this hall in, I believe, 47.
He was very proud and wanted to put back into the community, so he pulled the existing hall apart and reused as much as he could.
He built the hall, as you see, this area here, and where we're sitting in, the stage and everything.
It would have been one of the first jobs Alan ever done when he got back from the prisoner of war camp.
When this was built after the war, they got a loan from the bank, and Dad was the chairman, and he was one of the guarantors.
Dad gave timber for the posts underneath.
The stumps underneath, they were squared with a broad axe, and he had some good trees, and so he supplied that.
Actually, the floor in this hall came from my brother-in-law's property. It was a great big tree.
See, everybody gave, because they all believed that the local hall is the focal point of any district.
Part of him rebuilding the hall was actually probably part of him rebuilding himself, because the hall is a place where people can come together, and mateship, it's what got the ex-POWs through, that horrific experience.
Dad had bullocks up till 1947, and the mill started. Then he had to get a couple of blitzers to sneak the logs out, because the bullocks were way past their use-by date. The army would sell them, and I think the dearest we paid was $200, and the cheapest would have been about £200 it was.
When I was a kid, my mother was a Sunday school teacher and played the piano, and we used to sing "Hear the Pennies Dropping," "Listen While They Fall," and I can still sing it. But
do you want to sing it?
Hear the pennies dropping, listen while they fall. Everyone for Jesus, he will have them all. But Mr. Dunning, who was the sort of main teacher, he used to take them home, and I used to think, well, how's Jesus going to get them if he's taking them? People had bigger families in those days, and a lot of kids walked to school, but my dad walked to school. I rode a horse. You jump on the horse, you wouldn't put a saddle on, because as a little kid you couldn't lift the saddle. So you rode bareback. So you just hang on the mane and away you go,
Every school had a horse paddock in those days. Yeah, all the kids rode to school, rode a bike and walked.
Of course, it was in the country. We didn't go into school till 9:30 and we came out at 3:30. That gave us time to be in the dairy in the morning, and then in the afternoon on the way home from school you'd get in the cows and do it all over again. It was a pretty busy life.
When I was going to school here, most of the kids were off of dairy farms, and so they all learnt to work, they all learned how to do things. If you wanted to achieve something, you had to work. It was a very productive area during those times. People were growing bananas and they were growing citrus, but dairy and timber were very productive industries.
That's our mill, Mum. Well, Dad had about 8 or 10 blokes working over it, and I suppose one of them left, and he just said, you come into the mill to work today.
I've got photos of Dad in just volley sand shoes and shorts on, using a crosscut saw because they used to grip the trees better.
It was hard, very hard. There was lots of better jobs, but then it was always there, You knew you'd done your work. Or I was only a kid. It was a bit hard on me, I suppose. But
when electricity came, it was an amazing thing.
I was 13 before I ever switched on a light. Instead of trying to do your homework at night under a lantern, you had a light with a bulb in it.
I was a kid, I remember when the power came in here, and we climbed up, you could climb up the walls. There was no sheeting on the walls. You climb up the walls, and I saw these black electrical power, and I thought that was, you touch them, you're dead.
They had a special dance here to celebrate the coming of electricity. Everyone was quite excited. It brought us up to the modern day and age.
There was a dance usually once a month, and you never missed those. Most of them are still the old time dances. That stage of Peace Jive and the rock was coming in steadily.
You'd be packed to the rafters here. All the seats would be full.
No, in those days there was no liquor in the hall at all.
They'd drink anyway. And you know what men are like? If it's illegal, they'll drink, and they'll drink more.
We knew they had a few bottles of beer in their trucks outside, but we girls were not allowed by our parents to go outside and drink with them. It wouldn't have been the done thing. The dances were fun. They were a good place for young men and young women to get to know each other.
And in the progressive barn dance, you couldn't wait for the girl of your dreams to come round, you know. She'd come round and you'd only do up and back and swirl and out she's gone. For a teenager, it was great, you know.
And the CWA did the catering for those dances every month.
Women would go in the back room and cut up sandwiches, and they made beautiful cakes. And if everyone was having fun and the dance was going well, they'd let it go after midnight till 1 a.m. All the dairy farmers had to get up at daylight and go and do their milking, whether they'd had a dance or not.
For many years, dances were probably the mainstay of the finances for the hall. When TV came and impacted on the dances, a number of the dance halls around the area have gone.
Gradually, in later years, probably in the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of the farms were being sold to the Australian Paper Mill Company, planted with pine. And really, the district changed a lot then because there were fewer families, fewer kids at the school. A couple of times the school was almost hovering on the brink of not having enough students to keep open.
Probably half our dairy farms went into pine, and that took families out the district, and it had a really severe impact on the district and the school.
Then gradually the pine was harvested and it was sold then for subdivision. There was another big change. It all sort of changed again.
And the school became a lot bigger again. So as towns changed, the school numbers have fluctuated quite dramatically.
When my children came along, the old dances kind of rekindled for a little bit.
A number of the trustees had died, and there was only 3 left at the time.
My dad was treasurer of the hall committee for about 40 years, and I can remember they'd often have their meetings. He'd put on his flannelette pyjamas, his good overalls over the top, beanie and scarf if it was really cold, and come out in winter to the hall meetings.
Howard was very knowledgeable about history, and he's an integral part of the community.
Howard was a great historian for the community and for the Walker family. He'd always have a story about something.
I feel that the success that the halls had over the years can be attributed to those people that were trustees.
When my dad was here 50 years as chairman, I think he was pretty proud of the fact that he was chairman and I was his son.
They set out to get some new trustees, and 4 of us came on as a group.
When I came back here in 78, he said, "Hey, I want you to be a trustee." And Bruce and I joined as trustees then. I've been here 40 years. That's 90 years from the Bretons.
And over the years, we had a variety of celebrations that people like to come back and meet old friends.
I think you don't actually appreciate the childhood you have, I don't think, until you leave. You realise that this is the kind of lifestyle that you wanted your kids to have.
Peachester actually has a really special community, and it's kind of, I think, because it's been a little town for so long, and it's been very supportive.
It's an ideal community for mateship.
Because everybody knows everyone, they're there through the good times and the bad.
I have got a lot of good friends and a lot of very good friends, lovely friends. You would give your right hand for any of your mates there, and all of my very, very close mates are gone now. That's the only sad part of living a long life.
He would be so excited, Nev would be thrilled. And Bob Britton, who was the chairman of the Hall Committee for all those years, would be thrilled, I'm sure. But, you know, all those people who have been part of the Peachester story, I think they'd be really thrilled to think that we're creating this that'll keep the story going.